Ranger Reject Episode 4 was pretty much everything I ever wanted. Besides one thing. What was up with that pacing and production?
It's beautiful.
Some of you may have noticed that the pacing and production took a big quality hit this week, and there is actually a good reason for that. Ranger Reject Episode 4 adapted nearly the entirety of Volume 2 of the manga, which is 6 chapters, into one episode. But that isn't a bad thing, as people have already pointed out, as this episode may just be a simple setup for the next arc. GamerSupps are offering a promotion where all orders using my creator code CTactics or the link in the pinned comment will get free shipping. This is massive, so pick up some raw meat. The Jujutsu Kaisen flavor, which is called Cursed Energy and is awesome and is delicious, or the mango or blue flavors, which is also my favorite. The promo ends on May 2nd, so get your orders now while you can. In the Ranger Force headquarters in the Sacred Banquet Room, we are introduced to all of the Dragon Keepers and their plus ones. Officially, these are the juniors, and each of them has their own unique designs. Jin Himura is the Red Keepers, who he eventually slaughters the first chance he gets. He also leaked the information about the divine artifacts in the first place, and even tells Red Keeper to retire when he chastises him over losing the artifact. You can tell really how much Yumeko hates everyone in the Rangers, especially them, as she calls out the juniors' hypocrisy in her head. But it's evident when Red Keeper brutally murders him in front of everyone and barely anybody flinches that why Yumiko would hate these people. So of course Yumiko would be against these guys. I mean, they're savages who feel they can get away with literally murder in front of anyone. And while I still think there is more to Yumiko's reasoning, I can't imagine working closely with people like this will make you either become them or hate them rather quickly. Also, Yumeko is Yellow Keeper's junior, so she has a pretty high role in the Rangers, which makes me think even more that she's always had a plan to throw them down. This didn't just come around when D showed up. It must have been a long-term goal. As well, I did find it peculiar when Red forced Yumeko to bow, which was, I'm very honestly surprised they kept that moment in, just for reasons. The click of her tongue, though, and her averted gaze shows her hatred for Red Keeper, but also for everyone there when she proclaimed them to be some heroes of justice after losing their appetite when Red murders his junior. It's just really, this entire scene was a good showcase of, I think, a big hint as to why Yumiko hates these people. You also have Blue Keeper's junior, Komachi Aizome, who is a child, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. However, she isn't past putting Blue Keeper in line when he steps out, and their personalities are pretty much reversed. Komachi is a kind of the more mature one, but Blue Keeper is the more childish one. Then there is Green Keeper's Konon Hisui, and I can tell immediately this girl is going to be popular. Blonde lady with super long crazy looking hair, sailor outfit, yeah, she's got it all. She's basically Yumiko, but in a sailor outfit in many ways. But Pink Keeper, on the other hand, just has a guy. That's it. Just a dude named Masorao Nadeshiko. He's just a dude. So it's been a while since their last banquet. Yumeko is chastised for showing up late, but Yellow interestingly says she does stuff at her own pace, and this is another thing I want to bring up because this does make me think they may be in cohorts or something. It is interesting. Red kills his junior, but Yellow doesn't seem to mind that Yumeko does. Then again, Izome is the adult compared to her keeper. But this leads to our introduction to the Dragon Keeper's mascot, Draggy-kun. I love this guy's little design, but he doesn't have much of a role otherwise, and I don't have much more to say about this moment. Afterwards, as the Blue Keeper searches for D in the Sky Fortress, he gives his junior the order to search the forest, as there are two options a fighter has after defeat: retreat or be carried by the wind. This is where we get into, I would say, our problematic portion of this episode, which is the rest of the episode. Now, I want to say that if some of this sounds confusing, or maybe I miss a detail, I am deeply sorry. I don't mean to do it on purpose. This episode sort of cut out a lot of many smaller details and squished nearly an entire volume of information and story into what amounts to basically 12 minutes, give or take, of the rest of the episode. So D survived because of Yumeko's explosives, making it look like he blew up. However, D was still hit by the divine artifact, which means he is in a weakened state. Cursing the Rangers, he crawls on the ground as Sakurama has now found D in the forest and carries him to a nearby cave for shelter. D, seeing him, tries to swing at Sakurama, but he instead offers his help to try and patch up D, yet D is stubborn and angry over the Rangers and struggles really to accept his help. And we get a neat little moment here that becomes integral to this episode, where D showcases his ability to use other parts of his body to essentially patch himself up. On top of that, he reveals his ability to be able to create pretty much anything with his body, even a mask that he gives Sakurama and a cat hand. However, Sakurama, being the good-natured good boy that he is, tells D that he wants to learn about his kind and vice versa. Yet another showcase of how Sakurama wants to do things the right way, which is in stark contrast to Yumeko, who seems more tunnel-visioned on destroying the Rangers. This immediately cuts into a flashback, and this is when I first started to notice the pacing issues in full force of this episode, as the transition, or should I say lack thereof, gave me whiplash, and the rest of the flashback was also insanely quick, not letting up for even a moment, as if they were trying their hardest to get through it as quickly as they possibly could. Thankfully, the content of the flashback is basically intact. It felt just like it was on 2x speed. And we learned that growing up, Sakurama's parents were essentially a part of a cult that one day believed God would come down and save them all. You know how it is. But they also had some pretty strange beliefs, like when Sakurama rescued a cute little kitty cat from crows who were going to eat it. His father got angry and told him to essentially leave it there, as crows have to eat too. To which I say, die. Anyone who hates animals in anime always is a bad sign, and I think they should just die horribly. Besides maybe Boa Hancock, or as I say, Boa Handcock. Pretty good one. Eventually, an angel-like figure, the same one we saw in the end credits from the previous episode, comes down and essentially wipes out this cult, including Sakurama's parents, who, by the way, hated the Rangers. Even at one point, snapped a controller in half out of rage seeing the Rangers on TV. Wow, this guy was angry. And what I think is more important, though, is that Nobara is Sakurama's mom, and boy howdy, we were robbed of not only Nobara in Jujutsu Kaisen, but we were robbed of Nobara in Ranger Reject. I didn't even know that was possible until today. Though to be fair, this milfy version of Nobara seemed like a pretty bad parent and honestly, maybe a little bit insane. So maybe it was good? She sort of like died here too? Anyways, the flashback ends with Sakurama witnessing her sister being crushed under the rubble as the mysterious figure kills her. Here's the thing though, what happened to Sakurama's sister? And how did Sakurama survive? Very interesting. It's important to note that this flashback didn't have too much cut content in it, and it ended how it pretty much ended in the manga too. So this is pretty accurate the way this went. This is also the moment where Sakurama rejects the parenting of his father and mother and decides it is right to save his sister and to save the kitten, who eventually was killed in the end. This is a huge moment for his character overall and shows his awakening to the realities of the world and his own beliefs and convictions. But did his sister die? It's never explained how Sakurama survived. We just know he did, so what's going on with that? As well, his sister was instrumental in waking him up, as she was wise beyond her years and knew that her parents were up to no good. She was trying her best to work on herself and get out of that hellhole they called a family. And this is why she trained at night and why she slapped Sakurama at the end of her presumed life. She was trying her best to set an example for him and to wake him up to the realities of their parents. It's just a shame that the realization came when it did. Back in the cave, Sakurama tells D that he essentially beat Tokita, who was the 5th highest ranking junior, as he is a senior 3rd rank. Yumeko Suzukiri is ranked 2nd as junior 1st rank, and Red Keeper is number 1 ranked senior 1st rank. Now, this doesn't mean Yumeko is the 2nd strongest or Tokita is the 5th strongest person in the entire series. What it means is that the senior 3rd ranks are all together ranked 5th in the organization. This makes D blush something fierce, so good for him, he honestly deserves something good in his life. After Sakurama tricks D into giving him his name, he says that his goal is to help the people move on from this war they're in and stop the grieving. And it's a noble reason, as the war ended over a decade ago now, and the Rangers are still using it to hold power. This is when Sakurama spots one of the Keeper's juniors, Aran Hekiru, who he looks like a cross between Gojo and Best Boy Inumaki, but like with the personality of Bro Benny or Ko Benny from Chainsaw Man, except he is wielding a replica of one of the divine artifacts, which are still capable of killing the invaders just like the real thing. As well, invaders cannot use these artifacts due to an ability from the Keepers that disallows them, sort of like a safety just in case. Sakurama leads him in circles until D shows up to save Sakurama, and the fight really kicks off here. They end up leveling a part of the forest with their fight, and D shows a lot of really creative ways that he can transform. But this is where the episode really suffers the most from the cuts, as there is a ton of stuff in this fight they cut out, like D transforming into a little girl to fool him among other things. But once again, the trend with these cuts, just like they were in the first 3 episodes and the rearranging of the timelines, it makes me think that these moments were not budgeted for, so they needed to get past them quickly or just remove them. This is rather unfortunate because the first 3 episodes had such good production quality and pacing despite many of its cuts, but this fight felt sort of like a total afterthought, which to me signals that they didn't want to spend the budget on this scene and save it for later. I hope to God this is the case, because this doesn't make sense why they'd cut and move around a lot of these events otherwise. Also, it's not like this episode is horrible or the worst thing ever. The episode is still overall pretty good. It's just as a person who read this part in the manga, I felt this was paced badly, only relatively compared to the manga. That being said, these chapters in the beginning are really short. So it's not like they're cutting out insane things. It's more of just a lot of really small stuff that makes the pacing seem very breakneck. Because there isn't a lot of transitional moments for a lot of these things, it just kind of cuts to the next thing after the next thing though. But eventually, D takes Sakurama hostage until Hekiru does his guaranteed best Kobeni impression and completely fumbles the bag. Seriously, I think Negi Haraba absolutely loves and adores Chainsaw Man because Yumiko Suzukiri reminds us all so much of Makima, and now Hekiru is giving Kobeni vibes? I mean, what's next? They introduce an eye patch waifu and kill her off? Either way, good taste, Haraba. Chainsaw Man is S+ tier stuff, and I'm also glad he's a fan of Nobara too. This scene also ends haphazardly as Sakurama cuts off the head of D, but it's revealed that this was all just Sakurama and D's outfit as they worked out a plan to get D into the Rangers under the cover of Sakurama. To do this, however, Sakurama nearly dies and severs his hand off with a lightsaber to sell the disguise. Listen, I'm just saying, if I was D, I'd marry him right there. That guy is going through so much trauma just for him, just for this plan. And honestly though, at the end of the day, the animation for when he cuts off the fake head of Sakurama is just beyond disappointing. And it's really sad that this episode suffered a lot in terms of animation, because I think if the animation was really solid and the production was just a little bit better, honestly, I don't think many people would notice a lot of these changes. And with all of that being said, while the pacing and production took a big hit in this episode, the reason I don't think this is an issue is mostly because this is clearly just a setup episode. On Twitter, the studio behind this series is already promoting the next arc for Ranger Reject, and seeing that, it all becomes clear that this is pretty much a one-off. But with all of that being said, this episode of Ranger Reject was very fun, and I cannot wait for what this series will do in the upcoming episode. But with all of that being said, it's now on to my favorite part of these videos, the comments. The last video, we had so much that I just had to focus them down to only 4, which is what I think we'll be doing for the rest of the series, more or less. So if you have a comment you want featured, drop it down below. Amazing name here, Dingus Goober says, I thought this was going to be a better than average adaptation, but this episode got me super into the series again. It is clear the studio is either passionate about this show or passionate about finally doing something other than gacha anime for once. And yeah, I agree with this comment, and it's one of the reasons why I think this episode was more of a one-time scenario. This studio has only been known to do a lot of gacha stuff, and I've seen some of that. And granted, the ones that I did watch, the animation and production quality in those are immaculate. So it's not like they're a bad studio, but it's nice to see the studio flex their creative muscles, and and I think, like I said earlier, it's too early to say if this is going to be a bad adaptation or not. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, Gensis Chosen, he says. Reason why I really liked Go-Go Loser Ranger so far, because as if Gaara was the main protagonist of One Punch Man instead of Saitama, and Garu would be happy for D. It's refreshing to see how unique the protagonist is instead of copying typical shonen protagonist trope. I do really hope D will get nominated Best Anime Character of the Year. Now, I don't think that will happen, but I love shonen as much as the next guy, or meathead, whatever you want to call him. But I think this comment showcases how creative Negi Haruba is. I mean, going from a rom-com harem to Sentai meets battle shonen is hard to pull off, and the fact that he's done it and it's this good is just bonkers. So I'm glad you're enjoying the series. Silky Johnston says, that's by the way, a really good name. I have a theory that Yumeko is a boss of the Dusters that survived and is also an undercover mission to destroy the Keepers, anime-only viewer. This piggybacks off of last week's theory of someone believing that the Keepers are the bosses in disguise. And after this episode, I don't know if I agree with that theory that Yumeko is a secret boss of the Invaders, but one thing I do know is that she is best girl. Sayojin, I think is how you pronounce this phonetically. There are times you ask speculative questions about where things may go, but you mentioned how you've read into the manga, so you know where it's going to go. Makes the question come across oddly. And yeah, I have noticed this is an issue where I don't make this clear enough. So just to be clear and for posterity's sake, I've read up until what should be the end or so of the next volume of Ranger Reject. I haven't read it in a very long time, and when I did read it, it was weekly. So a lot of things are fuzzy, to say the least. As well, I ask these speculative questions mostly because I've forgotten them, and two, because I'm so early and relative, and two, because I'm still so early and relative to the rest of the series, which is now in the hundreds in terms of chapter length, that I just, I like to do that. Also, as well, I just like to ask these questions for people who don't, read the series or don't know anything about it. So it's just one of those things where I'm just interested in what you guys want to say. So thank you all so much for your lovely comments and positive feedback. I am grateful for every one of you, and I feel bad not being able to cover every single one of your comments, but if I did, I think this video would be 3 hours long and delayed by a couple of weeks. However, if you did make it to the end, support me by picking up some of the delicious C-Tactics merch, or use my beautiful code C-Tactics to get 10% off your Gamer Subs order, as right now you get free shipping by using my creator code on orders over $39 until March 2nd. Thank you everyone for watching. I love you. Bye-bye.